The cabin in the woods. The forest exterior blurred into streaks of emerald and umber as Maya's weathered Cherokee hit up the miles. Each rotation of the tires unwound her further from the sterile prison of the military hospital. The endless procession of white coats, the burdensome empathy in their gazes. The asphalt surrendered to a rutted track, stones pinging against the Jeep's underbelly as she crawled the final distance to the cabin. Her grip tightened on the wheel, the throb at her shoulder a persistent reminder. No more patrols, no more command, just this. This wasn't her choice. The cabin was steeped in echoes, a repository of a past she couldn't shake. Yet, the alternative, a return to her parents' suffocatingly perfect suburban existence, was simply untenable. Grandma's will was unequivocal. The cabin and surrounding land were hers, entrusted to her care. It was a heritage, a duty, and Maya, despite her reservations, couldn't forsake it. The cabin surfaced from the trees like a long-dormant secret. A time-worn structure, 2 stories tall, encircled by a generous porch, it stood resolute against the encroaching wilderness. Paint flaked like sunburnt skin, the roof dipped in places, but robust resilience radiated from it, a quality that strangely soothed Maya. She parked in the neglected driveway, the Jeep exhaling as the engine died. Silence dropped, thick and heavy, pierced only by the susurrus of leaves and a distant bird's cry. She inhaled deeply, the crisp scent of pine and loamy earth filling her lungs. It smelled like home, or a ghost of it. Before, the front door protested with a groan as she shoved it open, stirring a cloud of dust motes in the faint light. Inside, the air was stagnant, heavy with the aroma of aged wood and forgotten lives. Maya coughed, brushing the air. Everything remained as her grandmother had left it. Crocheted throws scattered across the worn sofa, an unfinished jigsaw puzzle frozen on the coffee table, a cherished collection of books lining the mantel. She roamed through the rooms, boots tapping against the bare wooden planks. The kitchen, with its antiquated stove and chipped sink, possessed a peculiar coziness, despite the film of grime clinging to every surface. Upstairs, the bedrooms showcased antique furnishings and faded photographs. Pausing in her grandmother's room, Maya's fingers traced the image of a vibrant young woman with twinkling eyes and a mischievous grin, Caroline Winters, in her prime. A sharp pang of grief pierced her. She yearned for her grandmother's stories, her unwavering faith in Maya's fortitude, even when Maya herself faltered. She selected the smaller bedroom, the one overlooking the water. It offered a single bed, a writing desk, and a window seat overflowing with cushions. Tossing aside the dust sheets, she flung open the windows, welcoming the fresh breeze. It was a start, however modest. The initial hours dissolved into a frenzy of cleaning. Maya scrubbed and scoured, banishing dust bunnies and cobwebs, attempting to obliterate the years of neglect. The physical exertion provided a blessed distraction, a means to channel her pent-up energy and quiet the clamoring voices in her mind. Yet, as the cabin transitioned into a semblance of livability, the quiet amplified, the isolation deepened. As twilight began to creep in, painting the room in elongated shadows, Maya realized she had neglected to eat. She unearthed a tin of soup in the pantry, its metallic scent permeating the air as it heated on the stove. Seated at the kitchen table, she gazed out the window, watching the last slivers of sunlight vanish behind the dense trees. The forest seemed to converge upon the cabin, a dark and impenetrable barrier. Loneliness, a familiar specter, descended with its full weight. This loneliness differed from the kind she knew in the army. There, she had been enveloped by people, yet separated by the invisible partitions of rank and duty, by the shared experiences that created a gulf no outsider could bridge. Here, solitude was stark and absolute, the consequence of her self-imposed banishment. She finished the soup, its warmth offering little comfort against the chill that now gripped her. The cabin groaned and whispered, each sound magnified by the surrounding hush. She longed for the reassuring thrum of the generator, the banter of her comrades, even the sharp orders of her superiors. She craved structure, purpose, the sensation of belonging to something larger. She attempted to read, but the words swam on the page. She tried to watch a movie on her laptop, but the images flickered and blurred, failing to capture her attention. A restless energy surged through her, an urge to move, to flee, to escape the stifling silence. Finally surrendering, she stepped outside. The night was crystalline and frigid, the stars glittering like diamonds strewn across black velvet. She ambled down to the lake, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots the sole sound. The water lay undisturbed and black, reflecting the starlight in its smooth surface. She perched on the edge of the dock, dangling her feet. The cold seeped into her skin, a tangible reminder of her isolation. Closing her eyes, she listened to the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. A twig snapped close by. Instinctively, Maya's hand flew to her side, seeking the Glock that wasn't there. Old reflexes ran deep. Her eyes shot open, sweeping the darkness. Nothing, only rustling foliage and the hoot of an owl. She took a long, deliberate breath, trying to slow her racing pulse. She was safe. There was nothing to fear, except for herself. She remained by the lake for an eternity, lost in contemplation. The stars spun overhead, oblivious to her struggles. She was merely one insignificant speck, adrift in a vast and indifferent cosmos. As the first touch of dawn brushed the sky, she rose, her muscles stiff and aching. She trudged back to the cabin, her steps leaden with weariness. Inside, the cabin waited still and silent. Maya understood this was just the trailhead. She had sought sanctuary here, but peace, she suspected, would not be readily granted. She needed to confront the shadows of her past, the demons that pursued her, before she could truly claim this place as home. And she harbored a premonition, a deeply rooted feeling that her grandmother's legacy held the key to her recovery. She slipped into bed, pulling the covers high. Sleep crept in slowly, uneasily, filled with broken visions of conflict and loss. But as she finally succumbed, she detected a faint sound outside, a soft whine carried on the wind, a sound that would shift everything. Whispers in the blizzard. The wind was a banshee clawing at the cabin walls. Snow hammered against the windows, each gust a percussive blast that vibrated through the old glass. Maya banked the fire higher, the flames licking greedily at the dry wood. The blizzard had descended with startling speed, swallowing the already fading afternoon light and turning the world outside into a swirling white chaos. She'd seen worse, of course. Sandstorms that choked the lungs and bleached the skin, monsoons that turned the earth to mud and threatened to sweep away entire villages. But this was different. There was a primal ferocity to it, a northern rage that resonated deep in her bones, stirring up old anxieties. She paced the small cabin, the rhythmic creak of the floorboards a counterpoint to the storm's relentless roar. Sleep was out of the question. The memories were too close tonight, the faces of fallen comrades flickering in the firelight. Each gust of wind seemed to whisper their names. Suddenly, above the wind's howl and the fire's crackle, she heard it. A faint, almost pathetic sound. A whimper. She froze. Her senses, honed by years of military training, went on high alert. She listened intently, straining to discern the sound from the surrounding cacophony. There was again a small, desperate plea carried on the wind. She grabbed her heavy coat from the hook by the door, ignoring the nagging voice in her head that warned her against venturing out into the storm. "Damn it," she muttered, pulling on her boots. Whatever was out there needed help, and she couldn't ignore it. Not again. She wrestled the door open, the wind instantly ripping at her, stealing her breath. The world was a blur of white. The snow was knee-deep, and the wind threatened to knock her off her feet. She squinted, trying to pierce the swirling chaos. "Hello," she called out, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Is anyone there?" The whimper came again, closer this time, seeming to emanate from the direction of the porch. She pushed forward, each step a struggle against the wind and the deepening snow. And then she saw it. Huddled near the base of the porch steps, almost completely buried in the snow, was a dog. A large husky, its fur matted and plastered to its shivering frame. Its head was low, its ears flattened against its skull, and its eyes, when she finally got close enough to see them, were filled with pain and fear. She knelt down, the cold seeping through her layers of clothing. "Hey there," she said softly, try to reassure the animal. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog flinched, but didn't move. She noticed a dark stain on its shoulder, the fur matted with blood. It was wounded, badly. "Easy," she murmured, reaching out slowly. The dog tensed, its teeth bared in a silent snarl, but it was too weak to do more than that. She gently touched its head, stroking its fur. "Easy now. You're safe." She could feel the tremors racking its body. Hypothermia was setting in. She had to get it inside and fast. Supporting its weight as best she could, she managed to lift the dog into her arms. It was heavier than she expected, but adrenaline surged through her, fueling her efforts. She staggered back toward the cabin, the wind pushing against her like a solid wall. Getting the door open was a Herculean task, but she finally managed to shove it wide enough to squeeze through, carrying the dog with her. She kicked the door shut behind her, shutting out the worst of the storm, and carefully lowered the dog to the floor near the fire. It lay there, panting shallowly, its eyes fixed on her. She could see the fear slowly receding, replaced by a flicker of something else. Trust? Hope? She wasn't sure. She knelt beside it, examining the wound on its shoulder. It looked like a bite, deep and ragged. It needed to be cleaned and bandaged. "Okay, big guy," she said, her voice gentle. "Let's see what we can do for you." She gathered her first aid kit and set to work, cleaning the wound with antiseptic and carefully applying a bandage. The dog whined softly as she worked, but didn't try to bite or struggle. It seemed to understand that she was trying to help. When she was finished, she wrapped the dog in a thick blanket and moved it closer to the fire. It curled up, its head resting on its paws, and closed its eyes. Maya watched it for a moment, a strange sense of peace settling over her. She hadn't felt this way in a long time. Focused, needed. She banked the fire again, then went to the kitchen to prepare some food. She wasn't sure what dogs ate, but she figured some cooked chicken and rice would be a good start. As she cooked, she couldn't help but wonder about the dog. Where had it come from? How had it gotten injured? And what was it doing out in the blizzard? She carried a bowl of food to the dog, placing it gently on the floor. The dog opened its eyes, sniffed the air, and then began to eat with surprising enthusiasm. "Good boy," she said, stroking its head. "Eat up. You need your strength." After the dog had finished eating, it looked up at her, its tail thumping weakly against the floor. She smiled. "You're welcome," she said. She spent the rest of the night tending to the dog, making sure it was warm and comfortable. As the hours passed, the blizzard raged on outside, but inside the cabin, a small, fragile peace had taken root. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she was content. She had a fire, a warm cabin, and a wounded dog to care for. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Hours later, Maya dozed fitfully in the chair, the dog snoring softly beside her. A sudden thump against the door startled her awake. The wind howled, but this wasn't the wind. The dog rose to its feet, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Its eyes, now fully alert, were fixed on the door. Maya reached for the rifle she kept leaning against the wall. This wasn't a friendly visit. The dog nudged her hand, then limped to the door and whined, pushing its nose into the crack as if it knew what was on the other side. She put her hand on his back, feeling the taut muscles of fear. "Who's there?" she yelled, her voice hard. A muffled voice answered. "Help us. We're lost." Ghost Tail. The iodine stung, but Ghost only whined softly, his brown eyes fixed on Maya's face. He pressed closer, his fur still matted with ice and blood. Maya worked with a practiced hand, honed from years of patching up her own scrapes and those of her comrades. She muttered reassurances, her voice low and soothing, a stark contrast to the biting wind still howling outside. Almost done, boy. Just a little more. She finished bandaging the worst of the cuts, then rummaged through a box of old blankets, finding one that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. Ghost seemed to recognize the scent. He nudged the blanket with his nose before settling onto it with a contented sigh. Maya heated up some broth she'd made the previous day, laced with scraps of chicken. She offered it to Ghost in a shallow bowl. He lapped it up eagerly, his tail thumping against the wooden floorboards. Watching him eat, a knot in Maya's chest loosened. She hadn't realized how tightly wounded she had been until she felt at ease. As the blizzard raged on, Maya found herself drawn to Ghost's side. She ran a hand through his thick fur, feeling the warmth radiating from his body. He leaned into her touch, his eyes half closed in contentment. It was a simple connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. The storm intensified, rattling the cabin windows and shaking the old structure to its core. Maya stoked the fire, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ghost lifted his head, his ears twitching, and let out a low growl, barely audible above the wind. "Easy, boy," Maya murmured, placing a hand on his head. "It's just the storm." But she knew it wasn't just the storm. He was sensing something she couldn't yet perceive. The following morning dawned clear and crisp, the world transformed into a pristine wonderland. The sun glinted off the snow-covered landscape, blinding in its brilliance. Maya opened the door, letting Ghost bound outside. He plunged into the snow, rolling and leaping with an abandon that mirrored her own newfound sense of freedom. She watched him, a smile playing on her lips. He was a magnificent creature, full of energy and life, a stark contrast to the broken, wounded animal she had found just days before. Inside, the cabin felt warmer, lighter. Maya made coffee, the rich aroma filling the air. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed Ghost nudging something on the mantelpiece. It was an old photograph, faded and cracked with age. It showed an elderly man with kind eyes and a warm smile, standing in front of a similar cabin, but the surroundings were different, less overgrown. Ghost whined softly, nudging the photograph again and again with his nose. He looked up at Maya, his eyes filled with a pleading, almost human expression. Maya picked up the photograph, examining it closely. She recognized the cabin, but the man was unfamiliar. "Who is this, Ghost?" she asked, her voice soft. "Do you know him?" Ghost barked once, then nudged the photograph again, more insistently this time. He seemed desperate to communicate something. Intrigued, Maya placed the photograph on the table and knelt beside Ghost. She studied his face, searching for a clue. He kept looking from the photograph to her, then back again, his tail wagging tentatively. Are you trying to tell me he's important?" she asked. Ghost barked again, a short, affirmative sound. Maya's mind raced. Who was this man? And why was Ghost so attached to his image? Was he the dog's original owner? The pieces weren't fitting together. She ran her fingers over the photograph, feeling the rough texture of the aged paper. The man's eyes seemed to follow her, filled with a deep sadness. A sudden thought struck her. The man in the photograph, he looked familiar, somehow. Not someone she knew personally, but someone she felt like she should know. She remembered her grandmother's stories, fragments of the past that she had dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman. Stories of a lost love, a broken promise, a life left behind. Could this man be connected to her grandmother's past? She got up and walked over to a dusty trunk in the corner of the cabin. It was filled with old letters, photographs, and other mementos from her grandmother's life. She opened the trunk, the scent of mothballs and faded memories filling the air. She sifted through the contents, searching for something, anything, that might shed light on the mystery of the photograph. She found letters tied with faded ribbons, photographs of her grandmother as a young woman, and other relics of a lifelong past. Finally, she found it. Tucked away at the bottom of the trunk was a small, leather-bound journal. She opened it carefully, her fingers trembling with anticipation. The pages were filled with her grandmother's elegant handwriting, describing her life in this very cabin, her dreams, her hopes, and her heartaches. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the text. Then she saw it. A name, written in bold letters. Samuel. Her heart skipped a beat. She read on, her breath catching in her throat. The journal entries described a deep and passionate love between her grandmother and a man named Samuel, a love that was tragically cut short by circumstances she didn't yet understand. She looked back at the photograph on the table, then back at the journal. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Could this Samuel be the same man in the photograph? And if so, what had happened to him? Ghost whined again, nudging her hand with his nose. He seemed to sense her turmoil, her confusion. He looked at her with those knowing eyes, as if urging her to uncover the truth. Maya closed the journal, her mind reeling. The cabin, the photograph, Ghost's strange attachment, it all pointed to a hidden history, a secret that had been buried for decades. And somehow, she knew that she was meant to uncover it. She knew that Ghost was leading her down a path that would change her life forever. She looked at Ghost, her eyes filled with determination. "Okay, boy," she said. "Let's find out who this Samuel is, and why you're so determined for me to know." The neighbor's secret. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the cabin windows. Maya was brewing a second pot of coffee when a persistent rapping echoed through the small space. Frowning, she opened the door a crack, bracing herself against the gale. A stout woman, wrapped in a brightly colored parka and a thick woolen scarf, stood on the porch, battling the wind. Her cheeks were rosy, and snowflakes clung to her eyelashes. "Maya, dear, it's Mrs. Gable. Just want to make sure you were all right in this awful weather." Maya, surprised and slightly annoyed by the intrusion, managed a polite smile. "Mrs. Gable, good morning." "I'm fine, thank you." "Oh, I know you're tough as nails, dear, never you mind. But a body can get lonely out here all by themselves. Thought I'd bring over some of my gingerbread. Fresh out of the oven." Mrs. Gable held up a tin, its contents emitting a warm, spicy aroma that cut through the frigid air. Reluctantly, Maya stepped aside. "Come in, then. Get out of the cold." Mrs. Gable bustled inside, shedding her parka and scarf, revealing a floral print dress beneath. She surveyed the cabin with a curious eye, taking in the worn furniture and the stacks of books. Ghost, who had been dozing by the fire, raised his head and whined softly, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Gable. "And who's this handsome fella?" Mrs. Gable cooed, approaching Ghost cautiously. He sniffed her hand and then nudged it with his head, soliciting a pat. "He's taken a shine to you," Maya observed, surprised. Ghost was usually wary of strangers. Mrs. Gable beamed. "Animals no good people. He looks like he's been through the mill, though. Glad you're taking care of him." She placed the tin of gingerbread on the table. "Help yourself, dear. Now, what were you looking at so intently when I knocked? You seemed quite preoccupied." Maya hesitated. She hadn't shown the photograph to anyone, but something about Mrs. Gable's genuine concern made her reconsider. She retrieved the faded image from the mantelpiece. "I found this. It was among my grandmother's things." Mrs. Gable took the photograph, her brow furrowing as she examined it. "Well, I'll be. That's Samuel Olson. Haven't seen him in ages. Poor man." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "You know him?" "Know him? Why, everyone around here knows Samuel. Used to be quite the figure in his day. Owned a big chunk of land up near Black Bear Creek. A real charmer, too, if I remember correctly." She chuckled, a wistful look in her eyes. Caroline Winters had herself a catch there for a while. Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Caroline Winters? My grandmother." Mrs. Gable nodded, her expression turning somber. "That's right. Before she married your grandfather. It was quite the scandal when they broke it off. Never did hear the full story, but folks whispered about it for years." "What happened to Samuel?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Gable sighed. "Things went downhill for Samuel, I'm afraid. Lost his wife some years back, and then his nephew, Victor, came to live with him. That's where the trouble really started. Victor, a nasty piece of work, that one. Always had his eye on Samuel's land. especially the mining rights. There's supposed to be a rich vein of silver running through those hills, you know. Mrs. Gable lowered her voice conspiratorially. The rumor is Victor's been keeping Samuel locked up in his own house, trying to force him to sign over the mining claims. Maya felt a surge of anger. Locked up? You mean he's being held prisoner? Mrs. Gable nodded grimly. That's what they say. Haven't seen Samuel in months. Victor keeps everyone away. Says Samuel's not well, needs his rest. But nobody believes him. Everyone knows Victor's after the land. Ghost whined again, nudging Maya's hand with his wet nose. He seemed agitated, his gaze darting between Maya and the photograph. Where does Samuel live? Maya asked, her mind already racing. Up past Miller's Crossing, about 5 miles from here. Old farmhouse, falling apart. You can't miss it. Mrs. Gable shook her head sadly. Poor Samuel. It's a crying shame what that nephew's doing to him. Maya stared at the photograph, at Samuel Olson's kind eyes and gentle smile. Her grandmother's former fiancé, now a prisoner in his own home. And Ghost, somehow connected to it all. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, Maya said, her voice firm, for the gingerbread and for telling me about Samuel. Mrs. Gable squeezed Maya's hand. You be careful, dear. Victor's not a man to be trifled with. But Samuel, he's a good man. Deserves better. After Mrs. Gable left, Maya stood by the window, watching the snow fall. The wind howled, but it no longer sounded quite so menacing. It sounded like a call to action. She turned to Ghost, who was sitting patiently by the door, his eyes filled with an unwavering determination. Looks like we're going for a walk, boy, she said, a grim smile playing on her lips. We have someone to rescue. She packed a small backpack with supplies, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and a hunting knife. She slipped into her warmest coat and pulled on her boots. As she reached for the door, she paused, glancing back at the photograph of Samuel Olson. Don't worry, she murmured. We're coming. A ranger's resolve. The wind keened around the cabin, a lament that echoed Maya's internal strife. Gable's accusation reverberated. Victor's keeping him for the claim. The insatiable hunger for land again. She stroked Ghost's dense fur, finding meager solace in his radiating warmth. A wet nudge of his nose met her hand, amber eyes brimming with a near-urgent intelligence. She hadn't volunteered for this life. Isolation was the salve she craved after war's brutal symphony. The ever-present dread, the faces of her fallen comrades burned into her memory. The cabin, a legacy from her grandmother, was meant to be a haven, a place to mend the fractured pieces of herself. But refuge felt impossibly distant. Maya moved to the frost-etched window, observing the blizzard's assault on the landscape. Trees bowed in submission, branches like brittle fingers against the blinding snow. She recalled the relentless ranger program, grueling marches under heavy loads, gnawing sleep deprivation, the unending pressure to surpass all limits. Imprinted on them was a creed, fidelity, valor, homeland, a guiding principle she'd lived by, a beacon in the darkest hours. Fidelity. The word tasted like ash. Hadn't she honored her pledge? Served, sacrificed mind and body, discharged as unfit. Did the vow still bind when the uniform was shed? Closing her eyes, she saw them. Reyes, the jester who diffused every tense situation. Jackson, the gentle giant with a compassionate soul. Lena, ferocious and steadfast, her laughter still echoing in Maya's mind. They'd been each other's anchors, entrusting their lives completely. They would have moved mountains for one another. And her? Holed up, pretending the world's woes didn't exist. An elderly man languished captive, imperiled, and she was debating its relevance. Revulsion churned within her. She opened her eyes, determination hardening her gaze. Ghost whimpered, sensing her evolving mood, pressing close, his body a reassuring constant. It transcended duty, she realized. It was a deeper pull, something visceral she couldn't deny. Ghost's reaction to Samuel's name, his uncanny understanding, the intuition that this wasn't random cruelty, but something tied to her grandmother, to a past shrouded in mystery. She approached the weather chest, untouched for years. Within, nestled beneath aged lace and sepia-toned photographs, was a map. An intricate chart of the surroundings, adorned with arcane symbols and notes in a delicate hand. Maya had dismissed it previously as a relic. Now, she scrutinized it with newfound interest. The symbols clustered around a precise area, a jagged, mountainous region north of the cabin, where, according to Mrs. Gable, Victor Olson held sway. Destiny? She scoffed internally. Yet, as she traced the lines, she experienced a tug, a sense of predetermination. As if the map, the cabin, Ghost, Samuel, all were interconnected, woven together by an unseen thread. The ranger she thought long buried stirred, the training, the iron will, the survival instincts, all lying dormant, not extinguished. Moving with purpose, she retrieved her rucksack, its familiar weight a comfort. She verified her supplies: first aid, compass, rations, a thermal wrap. She grabbed her grandfather's hunting knife, its blade still gleaming. Ghost watched, tail thumping, seemingly anticipating her next move. When she reached for her rifle, leaning against the wall, his excitement became palpable. He whined a low, persistent sound. Maya paused. She hadn't touched the rifle since arriving. It symbolized the violence she sought to escape. However, she couldn't proceed defenseless. Victor Olson, by all accounts, was merciless. Preparedness was paramount. She hefted the rifle, the cold steel a stark reminder of the world's stark realities. She checked the magazine, ensuring it was full. The weight felt ingrained, almost organic in her grip. "All right, boy," she murmured, her voice steady. "Let's bring him home." Ghost barked, a sharp, decisive sound, and bolted for the door, his eagerness a driving force. Maya inhaled deeply, bracing herself. Fear lingered, eclipsed by burgeoning resolve. A ranger, trained for any eventuality, she wouldn't allow an old man to remain captive when she possessed the means to intervene. She opened the door and stepped into the tempest, Ghost in the lead. The wind lashed at her, stinging her skin. The snow swirled, obscuring the path. But Maya didn't waver. Setting her sights on the distant peaks, the place of Samuel Olson's imprisonment, she began her trek. No longer running from her past, but toward a future yet unseen, but worth fighting for. She moved toward what she now understood to be her purpose. Through the snowy woods, the wind, a frigid assailant, nipped at Maya's cheeks as she cinched her pack tighter. Inside, sustenance and safety, calorie-dense trail mix, a heat-reflective blanket, a medical kit, and a map, Grandmother Winter's relic, rescued from a musty trunk. Tucked beneath her parka, a Glock 19 offered a grim reassurance. Ghost, sensing the shift in her focus, bumped her gloved hand with his nose, his mismatched eyes, one azure, the other hazel, bright with anticipation. He understood. This venture mattered. A palpable tension hummed in the air, thrumming through his very being. "Let's bring him back, boy," Maya murmured, her voice softened by the wool scarf. They ventured forth into a world reborn in white. The prior night's blizzard had draped everything in thick, flawless snow. Familiar trees morphed into spectral sentinels, their boughs laden with the frozen bounty. The air bit like a viper. Their guide, a faded rendering of the terrain, bore Caroline Winter's markings, a ghostly line in aged ink pointing toward the Olson homestead. A long shot, entrusting a decades-old map, yet their only compass. The first mile was a test of endurance. In places, the snow crested her knees, forcing Maya to carve a path, her muscles screaming with exertion. Ghost, on the other hand, frolicked through the drifts, his thick coat impervious to the cold. At times, he paused, testing the air, nostrils flared, deciphering some unseen message. Each time, he'd angle slightly left, affirming their heading. The woods held their breath, save for the wind's lonely lament and the crisp crunch underfoot. Sunlight, fractured by the dense canopy, painted elongated, skeletal figures that danced around them. A prickle of unease crawled across Maya's skin, a familiar echo from her ranger days, a hyper-awareness of her surroundings. The forest felt sentient. After an hour, the terrain took a turn. The gentle incline sharpened, and trees crowded close, weaving a complex tapestry of limb and root. Maya slowed, carefully navigating the obstacles. Ghost, ever alert, shadowed her, his body a warm reassurance against her leg. They reached a creek, its surface glazed with a thick skin of ice. Maya tested its integrity with a boot, the ice emitting a low groan under her weight. Ghost followed warily, claws offering purchase on the slick surface. On the opposite bank, the trail evaporated. An undisturbed expanse of white offered no clues. Maya studied the map, brow furrowed in thought. Caroline's markings indicated the path should continue along the creek. Damn, she muttered, frustration lacing her tone. Now what? Ghost whined, then began to circle, nose to the ground, an intense focus emanating from him. He moved with purpose, low and sleek, his tail giving tentative wags. He was onto something, leading her to a stand of pines, their needles bowed under the weight of snow. Hidden beneath them, partly obscured by a drift, was a subtle depression, a footprint. Aged but legible. Maya knelt, examining the imprint. Large, the tread of a heavy boot. And something else, a faint, lingering scent of wood smoke clinging to the snow. Good boy, Ghost, she praised, scratching behind his ears. You're invaluable. He barked a joyous sound, his tail a blur. Guided by Ghost, they traced the creek bank, the trail solidifying with each step. It snaked through the trees, drawing them deeper into the forest's embrace. The wind keened around them, a persistent, mournful sound that echoed Maya's own worries. As they pushed forward, the woods began to open, and Maya glimpsed a faint luminescence through the trees. She quickened her pace, her pulse escalating. Abruptly, Ghost froze, his body taut, ears pricked. A low growl rumbled in his chest, his gaze fixed on something ahead. Maya followed his line of sight, her hand instinctively seeking the pistol under her parka. Through the skeletal trees, she spotted it, a dilapidated cabin, smoke lazily rising from its chimney. It nestled in a small clearing, ringed by a rickety fence. The Olson property, but something felt amiss. The cabin appeared desolate, almost forsaken. No signs of occupation, no tracks in the snow. Only the wind's whistle through the boughs. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Maya. This was too convenient. She moved forward cautiously, Ghost at her side, his growl deepening. As they neared the cabin, she detected a faint reek of gasoline. Then she saw it. A tripwire strung across the path, concealed beneath the snow's deceptive blanket. Ghost, stay, she commanded, her voice a low, urgent rasp. He obeyed instantly, dropping to the ground, his gaze unwavering. Maya carefully disarmed the tripwire, her hands steady despite the thrumming adrenaline. It was connected to a rudimentary alarm, a can filled with rocks, designed to alert anyone inside. Victor was expecting them. The cabin door groaned inward, revealing a darkened space within. A flickering light cast elongated, grotesque shadows upon the walls. Hello, Maya called, her voice swallowed by the stillness. Anyone there? Silence answered. She inhaled deeply and stepped inside, Ghost shadowing her. The air inside was heavy with wood smoke and something else, a metallic tang, sharp and bitter. The cabin was small and sparsely appointed. A table and chairs occupied the center of the room. A cot was jammed against one wall, and in the corner, huddled beneath a heap of blankets, was an elderly man. Samuel Olson. He lifted his head, his eyes wide with apprehension. He was gaunt and frail, his face hollow and pale. Who are you? He stammered, his voice thin and trembling. My name is Maya, she responded softly, kneeling beside him. I'm here to get you out of here. A voice resonated from behind them. Well, Victor Olson drawled, emerging from the shadows, a shotgun trained on them. Looks like company's arrived. Traps and shadows. The echo of Victor's shotgun still vibrated in Maya's skull as she cautiously reconnoitered around the cabin. Victor was gone, for the moment, but the encounter had frayed her nerves. She swept her gaze around the perimeter, eyes squinting against the flurries. The frigid air, thick with the tang of burnt wood, also carried an undercurrent of apprehension. Inside, Ghost shuffled, a low, guttural rumble emanating from him. Restless, he sensed the peril that clung to the air. "Easy, boy," she soothed, nudging the door open. "Prudence is our best weapon." Ghost greeted her at the threshold, his typically bright eyes now shadowed with worry. He pressed his damp nose against her hand, then retreated slightly, his attention riveted on a spot just beyond the cabin's entrance. Maya followed his line of sight. Initially, nothing but snow-dusted ground met her eye. Then she saw it, a nearly imperceptible filament stretched tight between two sapling birches, inches from the ground. A snare. Her breath caught. Victor wasn't just deterring trespassers. He was actively laying traps. "Good boy, Ghost," she murmured, kneeling to examine the contraption. Crude, yet lethal, it was designed to trip a passerby and hoist them skyward. The wire, thin but resilient, was practically invisible against the backdrop of fading light and falling snow. Deftly, she disabled the snare, severing the wire with her knife. A shiver traced its way down her spine. This transcended a mere mining claim dispute. Victor's actions were escalating into outright violence. "He won't quit, will he?" she wondered aloud, more to Ghost than herself. Ghost whined again, nudging her leg, understanding the peril, the shift in the atmosphere. "All right," Maya declared, straightening her posture. "We adapt. We endure." She resolved to relocate from the cabin's immediate vicinity, surmising that Victor anticipated their entrenchment. She needed to channel her ranger training to anticipate his strategies. They moved with stealth, Ghost leading, his nose working the air currents. The fresh snowfall muffled their movements, but Maya remained vigilant, scanning the trees for any telltale sign. "Moments late, Ghost alta vrupli, sparka." A soft growl, a vibration against Maya's ribs, escaped him. She followed his gaze and located them. Footprints in the snow, partly concealed by the fresh dusting, but unmistakably present. Heavy boot prints, several trails moving in a patrol pattern around the cabin. Victor had surrounded them. "Damn," she hissed under her breath. "He's got us boxed in." They retraced their steps, careful not to leave any additional marks. Maya assumed that Victor's men would expect them to flee directly, choosing the most obvious route. She needed to subvert their expectations. She steered Ghost toward a dense copse of spruce, the dark needles offering superb concealment. Slowly, deliberately, they moved, avoiding snapping twigs or unduly disturbing the snow. Within the thicket, Maya paused to catch her breath. The air hung still and biting, the sharp, clean fragrance of pine filling her lungs. She took stock of their situation. Victor possessed superior numbers, but Maya held the advantage of familiarity. She knew this terrain intimately, having traversed these woods for years. She knew the secret paths, the natural refuges, the places where a person could vanish without a trace. "We need a distraction," she stated quietly, stroking Ghost's head. "Something to divert them from the cabin." Her gaze swept the surroundings, her mind churning. An idea began to take shape. A gamble, but potentially effective. She indicated a small, frozen creek that snaked through the woods. "We'll use the creek," she explained. "It'll mask our scent, and it flows to the old logging road." They followed the creek, treading carefully along the slick bank. The water was intensely cold, numbing her feet despite her insulated boots, but essential to the plan. As they proceeded, Maya spotted something else, faint tracks diverging from the primary patrol, leading deeper into the forest. Smaller, lighter prints than the others. Victor himself? Or another player entirely? The thought sent a jolt of unease through her. The situation was escalating in complexity and peril with each passing moment. They reached the logging road, a wide, overgrown scar across the forest. Maya knew Victor's men would anticipate they are using the road in a desperate dash. But that was the deception she intended to sow. She found a fallen log near the road's edge and meticulously crafted a false trail, meticulously mimicking an exit from the stream heading east, away from the cabin. "Let's see if they bite," she murmured. Then she and Ghost veered west, silently doubling back towards the cabin, but indirectly. They would circle, exploiting the terrain for cover, remaining veiled in the shadows. As they moved, adrenaline surged, igniting a familiar focus and resolve. She was a ranger once more, in her element, leveraging her skills for survival. But this was more than just staying alive. It was about safeguarding Samuel, rectifying a wrong, confronting her own inner demons, and finding a path to healing. She was fighting for something larger than herself. They moved with measured patience, biding their time for the opportune moment. The snow continued its relentless descent, shrouding the landscape in a seamless white curtain. The woods were silent, yet Maya was acutely aware of being watched. The hunters lurked, poised for them to falter, and Maya was ready to meet them. The rundown cabin. The air thinned as they climbed, the pines giving way to skeletal birches clawing at the sky. Ghost, usually bounding ahead, stayed close, his low growl a constant hum against the wind. Maya trusted his instincts. He smelled fear. She tasted it, a metallic tang on the back of her tongue. Finally, through a screen of snow-laden branches, she saw it. A cabin. Not the sturdy, well-maintained structure she'd expected, but a run-down affair, slumped against the hillside like a tired old man. Patches of tar paper peeled from the roof, revealing the gray bones of the wood beneath. The single window facing their direction was grimy, reflecting the dull light like a dead eye. A plume of gray smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a betrayal of the stillness that otherwise gripped the woods. Someone was here. Maya hunkered down behind a thicket of juniper, pulling Ghost down beside her. "Easy, boy." She scanned the surroundings, her ranger training kicking in, cataloging every detail. The angle of the sun, the wind direction, the texture of the snow. A fresh set of footprints led from the cabin to a crude outhouse tucked behind a stand of aspen. Another set, older and partially drifted over, disappeared into the trees to the south. Then she saw him, leaning against the cabin door, a figure slumped forward, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He wore a thick, brown coat that looked 2 sizes too big, and a knitted cap pulled low over his brow. He held a rifle loosely in his hands, its barrel pointed towards the ground. He didn't look menacing. He looked bored and cold. Maya nudged Ghost, pointing subtly with her chin. "That's our obstacle." The man shifted, stamping his feet against the frozen ground. He pulled a flask from his pocket, unscrewed the cap with a groan, and took a long swig. The smell of cheap whiskey, sharp and acrid, drifted on the wind. "Bart," Maya murmured, remembering Samuel's description. "Grumpy, easily intimidated, and enjoys his liquor." She studied him for several minutes, absorbing his posture, his movements, his general air of dejection. This wasn't a hardened killer. This was a man who'd made a bad choice and was now regretting it. "Okay, Ghost," she whispered, sketching out her plan. "We need to distract him. Draw him away from the cabin. Think you can handle that?" Ghost whined softly, his tail thumping once against the snow. His eyes, usually bright and playful, were serious, focused. He understood. Maya reached in her pack, pulling out a small piece of jerky. She held it out to Ghost. "Good boy. Remember what we practiced?" She pointed towards the south, in the direction of the older set of footprints. "Go. Find something interesting. Make some noise. But don't get hurt." Ghost licked her hand, then slipped silently into the trees, a gray shadow melting into the white landscape. Maya waited, her heart pounding a steady rhythm against her ribs. The wind picked up, swirling the snow around her, blurring the edges of the world. She checked her watch. 3 minutes. 4. Then it came. A series of sharp barks, followed by the crashing of brush. Bart straightened up, startled. He fumbled with his rifle, bringing it to his shoulder. "What the?" he muttered, squinting into the trees. He hesitated, then took a few tentative steps forward, away from the cabin. The barking continued, growing more frantic. Bart cursed under his breath. Stupid mutt. Probably just a rabbit. But he kept walking, drawn by the commotion. Maya watched him go, her muscles coiled, ready to spring. When Bart was far enough away, she moved. Swiftly, silently, she crossed the open space between the trees and the cabin. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. She could hear a faint cough from inside, the creak of a rocking chair. Samuel. She tried the door. Locked. Reaching into her pack, she pulled out a small set of lock picks. Her fingers, numb with cold, fumbled with the tools. She took a deep breath, focusing her mind. This was it. The wind howled, drowning out the sound of the tumblers clicking into place. A bead of sweat trickled down her forehead, freezing against her skin. Finally, with a soft click, the lock gave way. She eased the door open, just enough to slip inside. The cabin was dark, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and dust. An elderly man sat huddled in a rocking chair by the fire, his face gaunt and pale. He looked up, his eyes widening with surprise. Samuel, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. He blinked, his gaze unfocused. Caroline. No, Maya said softly. It's Maya, Caroline's granddaughter. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Maya, you came. We're getting you out of here, she said, stepping further into the cabin. Are you hurt? Just tired, he rasped, his voice weak. And cold. Suddenly, a shout erupted from outside. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Bart. He was coming back. Maya grabbed Samuel's arm, helping him to his feet. He swayed, unsteady. We have to go. Now. But where? He asked, his voice filled with fear. Anywhere but here, Maya said, her eyes scanning the small cabin. She spotted a heavy wool blanket draped over a chair. She grabbed it, wrapping it around Samuel's shoulders. Come on, she urged, pulling him towards the back of the cabin. There has to be another way out. The shout came again, closer this time. Bart was almost at the door. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rusty poker from beside the fireplace and slammed it against the single window, shattering the glass. Out, she yelled, pushing Samuel towards the jagged opening. Go. I'll cover you. Samuel hesitated, his eyes filled with terror. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, he scrambled through the broken window, disappearing into the swirling snow. Maya turned to face the door, the poker raised in her hands. Bart burst into the cabin, his face red with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He roared, raising his rifle. Maya met his gaze, her eyes cold and determined. I'm taking Samuel home. A clever distraction. Bart lurched toward her, face a roadmap of broken veins, the stench of rot gut preceding him like a foul herald. Maya knew time was draining away. Samuel's survival hinged on her. Ghosts, too. Above all, her own. She needed to stall him, create an opening. Not one step further, she barked, the command roughened by the adrenaline surging through her. Bart halted a scant few feet away, listing like a storm-battered schooner. Think you're so damn clever, waltzing onto my land. Your land? Maya countered, one brow arching in disbelief. Last I recall, this was Olson property, etched into the county ledger for generations. Unless you've rewritten provenance in my absence. She prayed the bar would find its mark, maybe buy her a handful of invaluable seconds. Bart's gaze sharpened to malignant points, his hand twitching toward the revolver snugged against his hip. You got a mouth on you, lady. Maya knew a direct assault was suicide. Not yet, anyway. Drawing him away from the cabin was paramount, giving Ghost his chance. She inhaled deeply, anchoring herself to the soughing of wind in the pines, the owl's mournful call echoing from the distance, the symphony of the wild she knew by heart. Then she unleashed a perfect replica of a rabbit in its death throes, a piercing shriek dissolving into a strangled gurgle, honed during her ranger days, a siren call for predators. Bart froze, his hand still hovering near his weapon, confusion momentarily eclipsing his aggression. What in blazes was that? Maya tilted her head, feigning wide-eyed innocence. Was what? I didn't hear a thing. A heartbeat of silence hung in the air. Then she subtly guided his gaze towards the tangled thicket behind him. Again, the rabbit's desperate cry pierced the air, this time punctuated by the frantic tattoo of her heel against the frosted earth, mimicking the frantic thumping of a fleeing animal. Bart's eyes flicked toward the trees, his focus fractured. Sounds like something's becoming lunch out there. Progress. Probably just a fox, Maya offered casually, striving for indifference. Or coyote, maybe. They're brazen this time of year. A softer, more plaintive squeal followed, almost swallowed by the wind, but potent enough. Bart visibly recoiled. Damn it, he growled, edging toward the woods. I can't stand that sound. He shot Maya a glare. Stay put. I'm going to see what's what. Maya plastered her face with a mask of contrived worry. Are you sure that's wise? Could be risky. He puffed out his chest, a caricature of bravado. I can handle some mangy coyote. As Bart pivoted and cautiously stepped into the shadows, Maya silently mouthed, Now, ghost now, towards the cabin's weathered walls. Inside, the air tasted of dust and aged timber. Samuel, bound at the wrists and ankles with thick, unforgiving rope, huddled in the corner. Hope had been a distant memory. Yet, the sudden appearance of a dark, canine shape framed in a shattered window ignited a flicker of belief within him. Ghost moved soundlessly across the floorboards, his amber eyes locked on Samuel. He nudged Samuel's hand with his cool, damp nose, then, with unwavering focus, began to worry at the ropes binding his wrists. The hemp resisted, but Ghost's teeth were relentless. He worked with fierce dedication, his powerful jaws relentlessly tearing at the fibers. Samuel flinched as the dog grazed his skin, but he remained silent, acutely aware that any sound could betray them. Good boy, Samuel rasped, his voice a dry whisper. Atta boy, Ghost. You're doing wonders. He clung to the dog's unwavering determination, letting the rhythmic gnawing consume the silence of the room. He willed away the ache in his limbs, the ravenous hunger clawing at his insides. Just a while longer, he pleaded with himself. Just a little longer. Outside, Maya continued her deception. She stirred dry leaves with her boot, snapped brittle twigs underfoot, crafting the illusion of a struggle in the undergrowth. She even tossed a handful of snow skyward, letting it scatter like dislodged down feathers. Bart grew increasingly volatile, his gaze darting back towards the cabin, a nascent suspicion clouding his features. I don't like this, he muttered, his voice low and guttural. Something's rotten in Denmark. Maya knew her distraction couldn't hold much longer. This had to end swiftly, by any means necessary. Inside, Ghost finally parted the last strand of rope constricting Samuel's wrists. He nudged Samuel's liberated hands, then immediately began his assault on the bonds around his ankles. Thank you, Ghost, Samuel whispered, chafing his numbed wrists. You're a true friend. A profound surge of gratitude washed over him, a sensation almost forgotten. He reached down and stroked Ghost's thick fur, marveling at the dog's unfaltering devotion. Freed, Samuel struggled to stand, his legs trembling. He leaned precariously against the wall, battling to regain his equilibrium. He needed to escape, to sever the ties that bound him to Victor's twisted designs forever. But he knew he couldn't outrun them in his present condition. He needed Maya's unwavering strength. Outside, Bart had reached his limit. The rabbit cries had ceased, supplanted by an unsettling quiet. He wheeled around, retracing his steps towards the cabin, his hand now a vice around the pistol's grip. This ends now, Maya muttered under her breath, a grim resolve hardening her features. She inhaled a bracing draft of frigid air and braced herself for the next phase of her desperate gambit, whatever form it might take. She could only pray it sufficed. As Bart rounded the cabin's corner, the scene unfolded before him. The ravaged window, the ragged splinters of wood, and the unmistakable silhouette of Samuel Olsen framed in the doorway, bolstered by the hulking form of a husky. His face twisted into a mask of unbridled fury. What in damnation? Maya emerged from behind a gnarled tree, intercepting his path. Looks like your guest checked out. She locked her gaze onto his, her eyes as cold and implacable as winter stone. Now, my suggestion is you let us walk away, and we'll pretend this little escapade never occurred. Victor's fury. The engine's roar, a gravelly snarl that ripped the dawn's tranquility, crushed Maya's last vestige of hope. Victor, back again. A knot tightened in her gut. This was off script. Inside, Samuel inhaled sharply, eyes wide with alarm. He's here, he wheezed, his voice lost against the wind's mournful cry around the eaves. Sensing danger, Ghost moved to shield Samuel, a low growl resonating in his chest, his gaze riveted to the front entrance. Maya cursed under her breath. Bart hadn't deterred him, or worse, hadn't bothered. She retrieved the pistol from her waistband, the chilled steel a stark comfort. Stay put, she directed Samuel, her tone low and resolute. Ghost, guard him. She slipped through the rear exit, moving with newfound agility, adrenaline sharpening her senses. The truck, an old Ford pickup, sat askew before the cabin, engine idling roughly. Victor had wasted no time. He was already striding toward the porch, a shotgun gripped tightly, his face a mask of fury, almost unrecognizable in its contortion. Samuel, he bellowed, voice thick with rage. Out here now. Skirting the cabin's perimeter, Maya kept low, seeking cover in the deep shadows. She had to stall him, by Samuel and escape. Victor reached the porch, hammering a fist against the door. I know you're in there, old man. Don't force me to break it down. He lashed out with his boot, cracking the flimsy wood around the frame. Emerging from the gloom, Maya leveled her pistol. Victor! He whirled around, eyes blazing like hot coals. The shotgun swung in her direction, the sunlight glinting off the barrel. Maya, he spat, venom lacing his tone. I should have known you were involved. This doesn't have to go this way, she parried, striving for calm. Just leave Samuel alone. He's not well. A harsh, grating laugh erupted from Victor. Leave him? Are you mad? He's holding on to something of mine. My rightful property. The mining rights? Is that what ignites this? Disbelief colored Maya's tone. You'd harm your own uncle for money. Don't judge me, Victor snarled, advancing a step. You have no clue what I've endured. The sacrifices I've made. Sacrifices? You've imprisoned an old man, tormented him, likely starved him. Is it your notion of sacrifice? Maya countered, her grip tightening on the gun. He's concealing something, Victor insisted, voice rising. Those documents, they're worth millions, and he's too damn stubborn to relinquish them. Perhaps he lacks trust, Maya suggested, her eyes narrowing. Maybe he foresees your intentions with the wealth. Knows you will only fritter it away, as always. Victor winced, his features darkening. Shut your mouth, he growled. You know nothing about my plight. I know you're inflicting pain, Maya said, a hint of softness in her voice. I know you're making regrettable choices. It's not too late to alter course, Victor. Release Samuel. Allow him peace during his remaining days. A moment of hesitation flickered in his eyes, some unreadable emotion. But swiftly, fury reasserted itself, hardening his face. Don't you understand? He said, voice low and menacing. I can't. I've gone beyond the point of no return. He lifted the shotgun, aiming directly at her. Where are the papers, Maya? Reveal their location, and maybe, just maybe I'll permit you to walk away from this mess. I don't possess them, she replied, her tone steady, masking the terror gnawing at her. Samuel does, and he won't surrender them to you. Then I suppose I'll have to seize them myself, Victor declared, his finger tightening on the trigger. Abruptly, a resounding crash reverberated from within the cabin. Victor's head snapped around, his attention momentarily diverted. Maya seized this chance. She threw herself behind the woodpile, stacked alongside the cabin, the dry logs providing meager protection. Samuel! Victor roared, fury saturating his voice. He wheeled and charged toward the door, kicking it open with enough force to send splinters flying. Peeking over the stacked wood, Maya watched Victor rampage into the cabin, shotgun at the ready. She could hear his bellows, his threats, the sounds of furniture being upended. She had to intervene. She couldn't allow him to harm Samuel. Taking a bracing breath, she scrambled to her feet and bolted toward the cabin, circling around to the rear. She needed to breach the walls, to even the odds. Within the cabin, pandemonium reigned. Victor was ransacking the place, tossing furniture aside, tearing down curtains. Samuel, with Ghost standing sentry before him, was huddled in a corner, his face ashen with dread. "Where are they?" Victor shrieked, his voice hoarse with outrage. "Tell me their location, you stubborn old fool." Samuel shook his head mutely, his lips clamped shut. He would not betray Caroline's trust, even at the cost of his life. Victor seized Samuel by the collar, hauling him to his feet. "You will speak," he snarled, his face mere inches from Samuel's. "Or I swear, I'll make you wish you had never been born." Ghost lunged, snapping at Victor's arm, but Victor kicked him away, sending the dog sprawling. "Ghost!" Samuel cried, his voice filled with despair. That was Maya's cue. She burst through the back door, pistol aloft, aiming squarely at Victor. "Let him go," she commanded, her voice a honed edge, "or I'll fire." Victor spun around, his eyes widening in shock. He shoved Samuel away, and the old man stumbled backwards, clutching his chest. "You wouldn't," Victor blurted, disbelief etched on his face. "Test me," Maya responded, her finger gently taking up the trigger's slack. Silence descended, broken only by the wind's howling dance across the landscape. The air crackled with tension, pregnant with the potential for violence. The standoff was underway. Flames of greed. The pistol chilled Maya's palm, a stark contrast to the oven-like blast that filled the confined space. Victor, reeling from Samuel's collapse, hadn't foreseen her countermove. His bloodshot eyes flicked between Maya and the prone figure of his uncle. "Get out," she commanded, her voice leveled despite the tremor threatening to surface. A guttural snarl ripped from Victor's throat. "You think that little pop gun scares me? Family business, Ranger." He waved dismissively at the weapon before hefting a shotgun. "Greed is the heart of this," she retorted, knuckles whitening around the pistol's grip. "And here it stops." Victor's laugh was a dry rasp. "Greed? You wouldn't grasp it. You play frontiersman in the woods. This is survival, about claiming what's owed." Samuel groaned, struggling to sit. "Victor, please, this isn't you." Victor's face contorted, anger twisting his features. "Shut your mouth, old man." He lashed out with his boot, connecting with Samuel's ribs. A pained cry escaped Samuel as he crumpled. Maya's focus narrowed to the raw animosity blazing in Victor's eyes. The air hung heavy, scented with pine and brewing madness. But before she could react, before her finger tightened on the trigger, Victor made an unexpected move. He dove not at her, but at the kerosene lantern swaying from a rafter. With a savage yell, he yanked it down, the glass threatening to shatter. "If I can't possess it," he bellowed, his voice cracking, "no one will." He hurled the lantern. It exploded against the wall in a flash of sparks and volatile liquid. Instantaneously, flames erupted, hungrily consuming the dry wood. A furnace blast drove Maya back, scorching her skin. Ghost, who had been a silent sentinel in the corner, whined and nuzzled Samuel, imploring him to rise. "Victor, what madness is this?" Maya shouted, choking as smoke billowed. Victor, stunned by the blaze's ferocity, seemed momentarily shaken out of his rage-fueled daze. But the die was cast. Flames danced and multiplied, reflected in his widening eyes. "We have to escape," Maya yelled, hauling Samuel to his feet. He was weak, addled, struggling for purchase. Ghost pushed against him, offering support. The fire devoured the wall, racing towards the ceiling. Acrid smoke stung Maya's eyes, stealing her breath. The heat was a palpable wave, radiating from the inferno. Victor, briefly frozen, shook himself and lurched towards the door, only to be met by a falling beam. He recoiled with a cry. "The window!" Maya screamed, dragging Samuel towards the small opening at the cabin's rear. Ghost was already there, barking urgently, sensing the peril. The window was cramped, barely accommodating a grown man. Maya struggled to hoist Samuel, his weight a dead load. Ghost leaped, nipping at Samuel's sleeve, urging him forward. "I can't," Samuel rasped, racked with coughing. "Leave me, Maya. Save yourself." "I won't abandon you," Maya stated, her voice resolute. She heaved again, maneuvering Samuel's upper body through the window. "Push, Samuel, push." He strained, his face etched with pain. Maya pulled with every ounce of strength. Finally, with a surge of desperation, she yanked him free. He tumbled onto the snow-covered ground, Ghost landing lithely beside him. Maya whirled back to confront the conflagration. Victor was trapped near the front, frantically kicking at the burning debris obstructing the exit. Flames licked at his clothes, smudging his face with soot. "Victor!" Maya yelled, her voice a bare thread against the fire's roar. "Jump! I'll catch you." Victor hesitated, battling fear with pride. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with smoke and the stench of incineration. He inhaled deeply and lunged towards the window, throwing himself through. Maya braced, catching his weight as he crashed into her. They sprawled in the snow. Victor gasped, choking. "Get clear of the cabin." Maya yelled, scrambling upright. "It's about to collapse." They stumbled away from the inferno, half carrying Samuel. The cabin was now a roaring furnace, the fire a ravenous beast. The roof groaned, threatening to buckle. The heat scorched, even at a distance. The air shimmered, distorting the landscape. Embers spiraled upwards, carried by the wind, scattered like fiery snowflakes. With a thunderous crack, the roof caved in, sending a plume of sparks and debris skyward. The cabin was reduced to a blazing pyre, a monument to Victor's avarice. Maya watched, face grim, the heat searing her exposed skin. Samuel coughed weakly beside her, Ghost nuzzling his hand. Victor stared at the burning remains of his ancestral home, his face a canvas of shock and remorse. The flames danced, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to mock his ambitions. The inferno illuminated not just the cabin's destruction, but the self-immolation of a man consumed by cupidity. The only sounds were the ravenous crackle of the fire and the wind's mournful sigh. The hidden cave. The heat blasted Maya as she hauled Samuel towards the door, the inferno Victor unleashed licking at their heels. Ghost, sensing the urgency, nipped at Samuel's trousers, urging him forward. The cabin groaned, would protesting under the assault of the flames. Maya coughed, smoke stinging her lungs. "Almost there, Samuel. Just a little further," she yelled, her voice strained. They stumbled out into the night, the fresh air a momentary reprieve before the reality of their situation crashed down. The cabin was engulfed, a raging pyre against the backdrop of the silent, watchful forest. Victor was nowhere to be seen, vanished into the darkness he'd created. Samuel watched, his eyes wide with a mixture of grief and disbelief, as his home became a funeral pyre. "It's all gone," he whispered, his voice cracking. Maya gripped his shoulder, trying to offer some semblance of comfort. "We're alive, Samuel. That's what matters. We can figure out the rest." Ghost nudged against her leg, a low whine rumbling in his chest. He sensed their distress, offering silent support. The immediate danger had passed, but they were far from safe. Victor was still out there, and they were exposed, vulnerable in the unforgiving wilderness. Maya scanned their surroundings, her mind racing, searching for a plan. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice firm. "He could come back." Samuel shook his head, his gaze still fixed on the burning cabin. "There's nowhere to go." "There is a place," he said, a flicker of something akin to hope in his eyes. "A place from my youth. Hidden. Safe." Maya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Where?" "Behind the falls," Samuel replied, his voice stronger now, a memory pulling him from his despair. "On Olson Creek. There's a cave. I haven't been there in years, but—" He trailed off, his eyes searching Maya's. "It's our only chance. The falls. Maya knew Olson Creek, or at least knew of it. It was a treacherous trek, especially in the dark, but it was better than staying put. And Samuel seemed to know the way, a comforting thought. "All right," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Lead the way, Samuel. Ghost, and I will be right behind you." The journey was arduous. The terrain was uneven, riddled with fallen logs and hidden roots. The darkness was thick, broken only by the faint glow of the burning cabin behind them. Samuel, despite his age and frail condition, moved with surprising agility, his steps guided by decades-old memories. Maya stayed close, her hand on his back, offering support when needed. Ghost scouted ahead, his senses sharp, alerting them to any potential dangers. The roar of the waterfall grew louder as they approached, a deafening symphony that drowned out the crackling of the fire. The air grew heavy with moisture, the spray from the falls coating their faces and clothes. Samuel stopped at the edge of a rocky precipice, the waterfall cascading down into a churning pool below. "Here," he said, pointing towards the curtain of water. Behind the falls, Maya peered through the veil of water, her eyes struggling to penetrate the darkness. She could make out a sliver of rock, a break in the solid wall of the falls. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the roar. "It looks dangerous." Samuel nodded, his expression resolute. "I'm sure. I used to play there as a boy. It's the only place Victor wouldn't think to look." Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped into the icy torrent. The water was shockingly cold, stealing her breath away. She stumbled, the force of the falls threatening to knock her off her feet. Ghost whined, hesitant to follow. "It's okay, Ghost," she shouted, her voice muffled by the water. "Come on." With a final push, she reached the sliver of rock behind the falls. It was a narrow ledge, barely wide enough for her to stand on. She turned back, reaching out her hand to help Samuel. He took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Together, they edged their way along the ledge, the thunderous roar of the waterfall deafening them. Ghost, after a moment of hesitation, plunged into the water and followed, his thick fur providing some protection against the cold. Finally, they reached the cave. It was small and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew and whetstone. But it was shelter, a refuge from the storm raging outside. Maya helped Samuel inside, guiding him to a relatively dry spot near the back of the cave. Ghost shook himself, spraying water everywhere. They collapsed onto the cold stone floor, exhausted and shivering. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape began to wear off, leaving them feeling weak and vulnerable. Samuel leaned back against the cave wall, his eyes closed. "We made it," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Maya nodded, her gaze fixed on the entrance of the cave, the curtain of water a shimmering barrier between them and the outside world. They were safe for now, but she knew their ordeal was far from over. Victor was still out there, and she had a feeling he wouldn't give up easily. The fire had died down, leaving only embers and glowing patches. The landscape was now bathed in darkness. She watched Samuel, his face etched with exhaustion and pain. She wondered what memories he held, what secrets were buried beneath his quiet demeanor. And she wondered what the future held for them, huddled together in this hidden cave, their lives forever changed by the events of the night. Ghost settled down beside her, his warm body a comforting presence. She reached out and stroked his fur, finding solace in his unwavering loyalty. They were a strange trio, bound together by circumstance and a shared sense of danger. An unlikely family forged in the crucible of fear and loss. But as Maya looked at Samuel, his face illuminated by the faint light filtering through the waterfall, she knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and that, she realized, was enough to face whatever lay ahead. Secrets of the past. The cave's maw, veiled by Olson Creek's torrential cascade, breathed a cool, loamy draft. Water hammered down, a relentless, ear-splitting clamor that resonated through Maya's very core as she helped Samuel onto a comparatively dry section of the stone floor. Ghost, unfazed, shook his dense coat, scattering droplets that caught the diffuse light like scattered jewels. Caroline always cherished this place, Samuel croaked, his voice a bare thread against the deluge. He trembled, though the residual burn of adrenaline still coursed through Maya. Maya busied herself with the meager remnants hauled from the charred cabin. A woolen blanket, a battered canteen, a few strips of jerky. Just enough to get by, for the moment. She averted her eyes from Samuel, the mention of her grandmother igniting a maelstrom of conflicting feelings. Caroline Winter had been an enigma, a sepia-toned image on a forgotten shelf, a name breathed with mingled reverence and regret by Maya's mother. "We need to warm you up," Maya stated, her tone brisk, practical. She draped the blanket around Samuel's frail frame, securing it snugly. "Eat." He accepted the dried meat with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Maya. I owe you everything." Silence descended, broken only by the waterfall's unyielding percussion. Maya knew evasion was futile. Those documents, Samuel. Victor seemed to think they justified murder. What exactly do they contain? Samuel sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the burden of a lifetime. He chewed slowly, his gaze fixed on the plunging water. "Not what Victor believes. It's not about riches, Maya. Not in the way he imagines." Maya furrowed her brow. "Then what is it?" He swallowed hard. "Caroline and I, we revered this land. We recognized the avarice in people, the way they'd ravage it for personal gain. The documents, they're a bulwark, a carefully constructed legal framework designed to shield this forest from wholesale destruction." Maya gaped at him, incredulous. Legal instruments to prevent mining? A contradiction in terms. How was that possible? "Caroline possessed a brilliant mind," Samuel replied, a spark of pride igniting in his eyes. "She grasped the intricacies of the law. She arranged the claims so that any major development would require unanimous agreement from all stakeholders. And she ensured those claims were dispersed, fragmented, virtually impossible to unite without collaboration. And Victor intends to unite them," Maya deduced, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. "He wants to obliterate the forest." Samuel nodded, his expression bleak. "He's been approached. Vast sums of money from individuals who value nothing but profit. They'll raise this entire valley if given the chance." The anger that had been smoldering beneath Maya's composed exterior flared into a blaze. She knew this territory intimately. She'd explored its paths, breathed its essence, sensed its ancient power. The prospect of its devastation, its obliteration for greed, filled her with a glacial, unyielding fury. "Why keep this from me for so long?" Maya demanded, her voice sharp. Samuel cast his gaze downward. "I was frightened. Frightened of Victor's actions. Frightened of involving you." "You didn't think I would offer my aid?" Maya challenged, disbelief coloring her tone. "I didn't want to burden you further," Samuel murmured. "You've endured too much already." Maya pivoted away, the reminder of her past touching a painful wound. She didn't crave his compassion. She needed the truth, unvarnished. "Tell me about Caroline," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "Tell me about your history with my grandmother." Samuel hesitated, then inhaled deeply. "We encountered each other here, amidst the trees. I was a young man just starting out, employed as a surveyor for a logging enterprise. She was a primal force. She knew every tree, every bird, every blossom. She beheld beauty in everything, and she defended it with unwavering ferocity." His eyes softened, lost in reverie. "We fell in love swiftly, deeply. We were engaged to be wed." Maya's breath hitched. Engaged? Her grandmother? The woman she'd always envisioned as a solitary, almost spectral figure, had known love? What transpired? Maya inquired, her voice tight. The light in Samuel's eyes dimmed. Her father, he disapproved. He desired a more suitable match. Someone with better prospects, someone capable of providing for her in a manner I couldn't. He exerted pressure, unremittingly. He convinced her that she was impeding my progress, that our love was unrealistic. Samuel paused, his voice thick with remorse. She ended the engagement. She claimed it was for my benefit. I didn't see her again for years. A wave of empathy washed over Maya for the young Samuel, heartbroken and helpless, and for Caroline, torn between affection and obligation. Did she ever marry? Maya asked, almost dreading the response. Samuel shook his head. No, never. I heard whispers, stories, that she dedicated her life to the preservation of this land in her own fashion, that she never forgot me. I never forgot her either. He turned to Maya, his eyes brimming with profound sorrow. You possess her eyes, you know, the same inner fire, the same unwavering resolve. And you carry her spirit, Maya. I witness it in your protectiveness toward Ghost, in the risk you took to rescue me. A lump formed in Maya's throat. She'd always felt estranged from her lineage, like a solitary vessel adrift at sea. Now, unexpectedly, she felt a connection, a sense of belonging. She was Caroline's granddaughter, and she harbored her grandmother's spirit within her. Caroline and we shared a vision, Samuel continued, his voice gaining strength. A vision of safeguarding this land, of conserving its splendor for successive generations. That vision, it's not extinguished, Maya. It endures within you. He reached out and clasped her hand, his touch surprisingly firm. You can thwart Victor, Maya. You can defend this forest. You can fulfill what Caroline and I initiated. Maya met his gaze, discerning the hope, the desperation, the unwavering faith. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose, a cause to embrace, a reason to have faith. The roar of the waterfall seemed less overwhelming now, more akin to a battle anthem. Her actions extended beyond mere protection of Samuel. She was defending Caroline's legacy. She was safeguarding the land she had grown to cherish. I will, Maya declared, her voice steady, unwavering. I give you my word, Samuel. I will. Confrontation in the cave. The reek of burnt timber still clung to Maya's jacket, a sharp reminder of their near entombment. She glanced back at Samuel, his sleep troubled, his breathing shallow and ragged. Beside him, Ghost stood sentinel. Though the grotto offered temporary sanctuary, Maya felt no solace. They were exposed, utterly vulnerable. Venturing to the cave mouth, she surveyed the frosted expanse. Though the flames were doused, the air still prickled with the stench of charred tracks, already blurring under the snowfall, pointed directly to their hideout. Victor was not one to relinquish a prize. A dry snap echoed nearby, and Maya's hand flew to the knife sheathed at her thigh. Come out, she barked, the sound bouncing off the frozen landscape. Victor materialized from behind a knot of snow-laden pines, his features twisted in a mask of fury. He brandished a shotgun, its dark maw gleaming under the weak light. You thought you could burrow in here? You're drawing this out, Maya. Just surrender the documents, and the old man can enjoy his twilight years. The saccharine tone barely masked the threat. Maya advanced, placing herself squarely between Victor and the cave's opening. Those documents are Samuel's. They safeguard this land from predators like you. Safeguard? They're just worthless paper. They could be worth a fortune. Imagine the possibilities. He gestured wildly with the shotgun. And what good are they doing Samuel, wasting away in this hole? You'd only bring ruin. You'd consume everything in your path, Maya retorted, her voice unwavering. She covertly measured the distance between them, calculating her odds. Victor was a volatile cocktail of avarice and desperation. Your last chance, Maya. Relinquish them, or things turn ugly. He leveled the shotgun, aiming it with lethal precision. In a heartbeat, Ghost became a blur of fur and teeth. With a guttural roar, he launched himself at Victor, disrupting his stance. The shotgun roared, the blast shattering the silence and sending a murder of ravens spiraling into the overcast sky. Victor staggered back, swearing as Ghost's jaws locked onto his calf. The dog's hold was tenacious, unwavering. Victor bucked, attempting to dislodge him, but Ghost remained steadfast, his gaze fixed on his adversary. Maya exploited the opening. With the speed and precision of a seasoned warrior, she closed the gap. She seized Victor's wrist, twisting with brutal force. He cried out, the shotgun clattering into the snow. With a swift kick, she sent the weapon sliding further into the drifts. Then, deploying a maneuver honed during her ranger service, she swept Victor's legs from under him. He slammed into the ground, gasping for air. Ghost released his grip, retreating slightly, but remaining alert, poised to strike again. He offered a soft whine, checking on Maya. "Stay put," Maya murmured, her eyes never leaving Victor. He lay sputtering in the snow, his face ashen with shock and agony. "You damn heretic," he spat, struggling to rise. Maya knelt beside him, her expression inscrutable. "This doesn't have to end like this, Victor. Just go. Leave Samuel alone, and leave this land be." "Never," he bellowed, surging towards her. Maya sidestepped his clumsy lunge, using his own weight against him. She pinned him, her knee pressing into his sternum. "It's over, Victor. You won't get your hands on those documents." She retrieved a length of rope from her pack, swiftly binding his hands behind his back. He writhed and cursed, but Maya ignored him, concentrating on securing the restraints. Once he was properly bound, she rose, brushing the snow from her clothing. Ghost ambled over, nudging her hand. She stroked his thick coat, a silent expression of gratitude. "He needs medical help," Samuel rasped from the cave entrance. He had managed to brace himself against the cave wall, his eyes clouded with concern. Maya nodded grimly. "I know. I'll escort him back to town, deliver him to the authorities." She glanced down at Victor, still spitting venom. Perhaps a few nights in a cell will offer some perspective. Hauling Victor to his feet was a struggle. Even restrained, he was dead weight and utterly defiant. Maya dragged him away from the cave, Ghost flanking them, ensuring he wouldn't attempt any desperate moves. The trek back was slow and punishing, the deep snow making each step a labor. Victor remained uncharacteristically quiet, his rage simmering just beneath the surface. Maya knew he wouldn't concede defeat. He was a specter that would continue to haunt them. As they neared the edge of the trees, Maya paused, casting a backward glance at the forest, the snow-draped peaks, the land her grandmother had so fiercely defended. A surge of resolve coursed through her. She wouldn't allow Victor to desecrate it. She wouldn't allow him to stain her grandmother's memory. She pressed onward, Victor stumbling beside her, Ghost a steadfast shadow at her heel. The skirmish in the cave had concluded, but the true battle for the forest had only just commenced. A new family. Alternating strobes of crimson and azure splashed across the surrounding woods as the deputies hustled Victor into the back of a patrol car. He hawked a glob of saliva near Maya's boots, his gaze a viperous glare. "This isn't finished, Ranger. Don't think you've accomplished anything." Maya remained impassive, her concern solely for Samuel. He trembled, though the terror in his gaze seemed to have diminished. Ghost, with a comforting nudge of his damp nose, offered silent reassurance. A deputy approached. "We'll process him. Anything more we should know?" Maya shook her head. He was after documents. Mining claims related to this property. "We'll inventory everything in the cabin. You'll have it back. And ma'am," the deputy added with a note of respect, "you handled that well. You're clearly capable." Maya managed a thin smile. "Just trying to keep things calm." With Victor gone, a sense of relief washed through the woods, though the sharp scent of burnt timber still hung in the air. The deputy nodded curtly before climbing into his vehicle, and a string of flashing lights receded down the long, snaking drive. As the wail of the sirens died away, a wave of bone-deep weariness crashed over Maya. She helped Samuel into her truck, Ghost leaping into the bed. The brief journey back to the cabin passed in quiet contemplation. The cabin stood firm against the encroaching night, radiating a welcoming glow in the wake of the harrowing events. Maya parked, and they slowly entered. Inside, Caroline's essence lingered, a familiar embrace that soothed Maya's frayed nerves. She gently settled Samuel on the sofa. "Hungry? I could fix some soup," she proposed, her tone gentler than it had been in days. Samuel gave a slow nod. "That would be nice, Maya." As the soup bubbled on the stove, Maya tidied, attempting to banish the lingering signs of the night's brutality. She righted the overturned photo of Caroline, beaming in front of the cabin. Straightening it, she traced the glass, a pang of bittersweet sorrow tugging at her heart. Refueled, Samuel seemed a little stronger. "I should show you something," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. He gestured for Maya to follow. He guided her to a corner, to an antique wooden chest tucked under a tapestry. His hands shaking, he unlocked and raised the heavy lid. Within lay a collection of aged photographs, faded ribbons, and bundles of letters bound with twine. "These things from Caroline," Samuel said, his voice thick. "Kept things we shared." Maya knelt beside him, her pulse quickening. She carefully lifted a stack of letters, recognizing the familiar script on the envelopes. Her grandmother's penmanship. The letters were addressed to Samuel. "She never mentioned you," Maya breathed. Samuel's eyes shimmered. "Life is complex, Maya. There were reasons she couldn't." Maya untied the twine and gingerly unfolded a letter. The paper, fragile and yellowed, held the faded ink of a heartfelt message. "My dearest Samuel, the forest is a riot of color this autumn. Each leaf a tiny ember. I long for you to witness it with me. I yearn for our riverside strolls, our starlit conversations. Every day, absent you feels like an eternity. I know our journey is fraught, but my heart is yours eternally. Forever yours." Caroline Maya's breath caught. She scanned another letter, then another, each a testament to the enduring bond between Samuel and her grandmother. A clandestine affection, hushed by circumstance, yet a love that had undeniably shaped their lives. She gazed at Samuel, his face a landscape of sorrow and tenderness. In that instant, understanding bloomed. She grasped why Caroline had kept Samuel a secret, understood the sacrifices both had endured, and she understood her own pull to this place, to this man. It wasn't simply inheriting property. It was inheriting an enduring legacy of affection, loyalty, resilience. It was about kin. "I had no idea," Maya murmured, her voice catching. Samuel reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "She cherished you deeply, Maya. She would have wanted you to know." Maya squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt an overwhelming connection, not just to her grandmother, but to Samuel, to Ghost, to this land. The solitude that had long been her shadow began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning sense of belonging. Ghost rested his head on Maya's knee, his soulful eyes fixed on her. She stroked his fur, relishing his warmth. "I'm staying," Maya declared, her voice resolute. "I'm not abandoning you, Samuel. Not now. Not ever." A genuine, heartfelt smile illuminated Samuel's face. "I would like that very much, Maya. Very much indeed." The fire snapped and popped in the hearth, casting dancing patterns on the walls. Maya surveyed the cabin, at the familiar objects that had once been merely reminders of a past she couldn't quite embrace. Now, they symbolized a future she was prepared to claim. A future alongside Samuel, with Ghost, guided by her grandmother's legacy. She knew the struggle to protect the land was far from over. Victor would return, or someone like him, but she felt emboldened. She possessed a purpose now, a reason to stand firm. She had found a family. Settling into an armchair, Ghost nestled at her feet, and Samuel resting peacefully on the sofa, Maya picked up another letter. She read it slowly, savoring each word, each declaration of love and devotion. She was finally home.